Let's move on to some other news from the region, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, also known as ASEAN, has kicked off a series of ministerial meetings in Cambodia. Foreign ministers will be discussing key challenges in the region, mainly the deepening crisis in Myanmar and some other security issues as well.
If more prisoners are to be executed, we will be forced to rethink about our role regarding to ASEAN's 5-point consensus.
Now, ASEAN ministers will also discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine and Beijing's growing presence in the South China Sea. The meeting comes just hours after Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, which we've just been talking about, just hours after that wrapped up. Meanwhile, foreign ministers are aiming to ramp up pressure on Myanmar's military junta. The group decided to ban the junta's representative from actually attending this meeting.
As I said, the agenda for the foreign ministers today include a topic about the regional and global issues. I think foreign ministers will use this opportunity to discuss and exchange views, as well as finding any common ground so that ASEAN could take part in facilitating and issue recommendations so that the situation in Taiwan will be stable and that it won't lead to a conflict and won't escalate the political heat between all concerned parties.
Now, ASEAN also says it might reconsider a plan agreed with Myanmar if the regime hangs more political prisoners. The 5-point consensus, as it's known, called for an immediate end to violence and also dialogue between the military junta and its political opponents. Early last year, the military junta ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's democratically elected government in a coup. More than 2,100 people have since been killed in a brutal crackdown on dissent. Now, joining us for more on this story is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, who is in New Delhi. Siddhant, thanks very much for joining us on the broadcast. What can we expect from ASEAN foreign ministers when it comes to that issue of Myanmar? Are we expecting anything concrete to come out of this meeting?
Well, Myanmar remains the top concern for the ASEAN grouping, and this is, of course, dominating the subject as the foreign ministers meet in Cambodia. In fact, today, when the session started, the Prime Minister of Cambodia referred to Myanmar multiple times, in fact, saying that ASEAN could rethink its strategy or way forward in terms of dealing with Myanmar. So remember, if I can give you a background, since the coup that happened last year, ASEAN worked together and came out with 5-point consensus that basically calls for a dialogue between the parties in Myanmar, that is the military junta and, of course, the opposition and, of course, Aung San Suu Kyi and other democratically elected leaders before, of course, the coup that happened. That hasn't, of course, happened. The violence continues, and what in fact was a big embarrassment for ASEAN was that last month the military junta executed a pro-democracy activist. Now that, of course, has really riled up ASEAN. So this time, of course, when the joint statement comes, when the foreign ministers meeting comes to a close, do expect a pretty strong statement against the ruling dispensation in Myanmar. So that, of course, remains a key takeaway, but concerns remain in the grouping, but also outside of grouping as to what is happening in Myanmar, especially in terms of the erosion of rights of the people and, of course, what's happening to the opposition, including Aung San Suu Kyi.
And Siddhant, that issue clearly going to dominate the discussions, but what else do you think they're going to be discussing over the course of the next few hours or so?
Well, other than Myanmar, it's the issue of South China Sea. that is expected to be the big issue, given the fact that how contentious it has been within the grouping, and of course ASEAN and China as well. So China remains the dragon, in fact, in the room, and it of course has been dividing opinion in the grouping as well. What will be interesting to be seen is that will the joint statement mention about the South China Sea dispute, especially given the fact it's natural that Philippines is expected to strongly raise it. Second, of course, is the membership of East Timor. Will it be taken or not? There was a mention by the Prime Minister, the Cambodian Prime Minister, earlier today. But of course, there are certain hitches yet regarding its membership. But outside of the region, of course, what we are seeing when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to Chinese aggressive actions, these are other issues that will be talked about. In fact, the Cambodian Prime Minister also mentioned about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how it's impacting the bloc as well. So these are other international issues that will be discussed in this all-important meeting that is underway.
Yeah, really the world's attention on Southeast Asia right now, with Nancy Pelosi there, as well as this ASEAN meeting. Siddhant Sibal live for us in New Delhi there. Thanks very much for that. Now, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Bilal Bhutto Zardari will also be taking part in that ASEAN meeting that I was just discussing with Siddhant there. Our Pakistan Bureau Chief Unas Malik has more details on that.
Pakistan's Foreign Minister Bilal Bhutto Zardari has departed for Cambodia, where he will be arriving later today to take part in the ASEAN Regional Forum, the ARF Ministerial Meeting, which will be having member countries and in participation at ministerial level, where in Cambodia the Pakistani Foreign Minister is to hold meetings with the Prime Minister and the President of Cambodia, as well as bilateral meetings on the sidelines. Now, this event will focus at least on Pakistan's perspective, would be to increase more bilateral cooperation and multilateral cooperation between the ASEAN countries and Pakistan. Anas Malik in Islamabad, Pakistan for WION World is One.